She yelled, "Stop the wedding!" And in front of 100 guests, the CEO millionaire's entire world unraveled. Jason Matthews stood by the window of his mansion, looking out over the meticulously landscaped garden where tents and floral arches were being set up for the wedding ceremony. He adjusted the cuff of his tailored black suit and took a deep breath. It had been 3 years since his wife, Emily, died in a car crash that nearly broke him. He had built a fortress of work and routine around himself after that, becoming even more successful, expanding his tech company, and diving into every board meeting as if it could silence the pain. But everything changed the day he met Lily. She had been 5 years old, silent and wide-eyed, sitting in the corner of the orphanage playroom holding a worn stuffed fox. He hadn't meant to adopt that day. He was simply visiting as part of a charity partnership. But something in her eyes, haunted, cautious, and heartbreakingly hopeful, made him kneel beside her and ask her name. The bond was instant, inexplicable, and profound. Within weeks, the paperwork was complete. He brought her home, and slowly she brought him back to life. Now she was 8, still quiet but sharper than most adults he knew. She had an intuition that went beyond her years, a watchfulness that others might have mistaken for shyness. But Jason saw it. She noticed everything. And more than anything, she was his. Today was supposed to be a new beginning, not just for him, but for Lily too. Cassandra Blake was everything a man like Jason was expected to marry. Beautiful, poised, and from the right kind of family. They'd met at a charity gala. She'd laughed at his awkward jokes and touched his hand like she'd known him forever. After a year of dating, it felt like the logical next step. She had charmed everyone. His board, his friends, even the tabloids. Everyone except Lily. She was polite, of course. But Jason had noticed the subtle way she would shrink in Cassandra's presence. How her eyes would track her future stepmother's every move without a word. He'd asked her once gently if something was wrong. Lily had only shaken her head and whispered, "She smiles differently when you're not looking." He had brushed it off as nerves, as the normal struggle a child might face when their parent remarries. After all, Cassandra had made an effort. She brought Lily books and jewelry, called her sweetheart in public. Jason told himself it would just take time. But now, standing in his room while wedding preparations continued downstairs, he felt a strange unease. Lily hadn't said much all morning. She'd been quiet at breakfast, barely touching her pancakes. And when he kissed her forehead and said, "Big day today," she'd simply nodded and walked off clutching her tablet. He turned from the window and picked up his tie, trying to shake the feeling. This was going to be a good day, a beautiful day. A day where he would finally close the door on grief and open a new chapter with a woman who wanted to build a life with him. Somewhere downstairs, a string quartet began tuning their instruments. He didn't know yet that the smallest voice in his life would soon become the loudest, or that Lily had discovered something no one else had the courage to see. Lily sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor, the pale yellow dress laid out neatly on her. Bed behind her, its ruffles catching soft streaks of sunlight coming through the window. In her hands was the same tablet she used for school, for drawing, for watching cartoons. But today, it had become something else entirely. Evidence. Proof. A message she wasn't sure the world would be ready to hear. She had watched the video 3 times already. Not because she needed to be convinced. She had heard every word the first time. But because some part of her couldn't believe that someone could be so cruel and calculated, especially someone who smiled so easily and kissed her dad on the cheek, like she loved him. Cassandra's voice on the recording was sharp, clear, and horrifying. "As soon as we're married, I'll have access to his accounts. A few weeks later, the brakes fail. Instant inheritance." "You just wait," her friend had laughed. A high, forced cackle that made Lily's stomach turn. "You're insane, Cass." "I'm smart," Cassandra snapped back. "He has no prenup, and once he's gone, I'll be a very wealthy widow. One little accident, and I'll be out of this suburban nightmare and into a penthouse in Milan." Lily had been frozen outside the door, the tablet shaking slightly in her small hands as it recorded the audio and grainy video of Cassandra. Not just revealing a plan, but doing so with confidence. It wasn't a fantasy. It wasn't a joke. It was real. When Lily had crept away and into her room, she locked the door behind her. Her fingers hovered over the screen. She thought about going straight to her dad. She almost did. But then, the fear set in. What if he didn't believe her? What if Cassandra found out she knew? What if she somehow twisted the story and made her dad believe Lily was lying? She was just a child after all. Cassandra was an adult who everyone liked, everyone but Lily. So instead, Lily did what she always did when she was scared. She sat very still, thought very hard. She laid the tablet on her bed and walked to her small whiteboard in the corner of the room. With a blue marker, she started writing a list under the heading, What to Do. Option 1, tell Dad. Option 2, show the video during the wedding. Option 3, call 911. Option 4, talk to Aunt Jenny. Her Aunt Jenny, Jason's younger sister, was the only other adult Lily sometimes felt safe confiding in. But she wasn't at the house yet. She was flying in from Chicago and wouldn't arrive until just before the ceremony. Lily stared at the list until her eyes blurred. Then from the hallway, she heard footsteps. Cassandra's voice floated through the door, light and sugary sweet. Lily, sweetheart, are you getting dressed? It's a very special day. Lily didn't answer. She held her breath and waited until the footsteps faded. She turned back to her whiteboard and underlined option 2, twice. Later that afternoon, Lily stood in front of the mirror in her yellow dress. It had once belonged to Jason's late wife, Emily, when she was a child. Jason had shown it to Lily weeks ago, smiling sadly as he told her Emily's mother had saved it. She would have loved to see you in this, he said gently. You don't have to wear it, but I think she'd be happy. Lily had nodded, not knowing then that this dress might be what she wore the day she saved her father's life. She brushed her long dark hair as best she could, her small hands trembling slightly. In the corner of her room, her tablet was fully charged, set to the video, and ready to play with one tap. The adults downstairs laughed and clinked glasses. The string quartet played louder now. Lily took one last look at herself in the mirror. Not just a child today, not just a guest at the wedding. She was going to be the voice that no one expected, and the only one willing to speak the truth. The ceremony was moments away. Downstairs, the mansion's grand hall had been transformed into a dreamy setting for a high society wedding. White roses and ivory silk draped every arch. Candlelight flickered from gold-trimmed sconces, and the smell of perfume and polished wood filled the air. Guests were arriving in sleek cars and custom gowns, chattering excitedly about the wedding of Jason Matthews, the elusive tech tycoon whose love life had been a mystery for years, until Cassandra Blake entered the picture. Jason stood in a small side room with his best man, buttoning the last of his tuxedo cuffs. His nerves had returned in full force. He couldn't stop glancing at the door, half expecting Lily to walk in and give him that serious, knowing look of hers. She always saw more than she said. She's going to be okay, right? He asked aloud, more to himself than anyone. Lily, of course, his best man replied. She's a tough little kid. She likes Cassandra, doesn't she? Jason hesitated. She's been quiet lately, more than usual. I don't know. Something feels off. Upstairs, Lily stood frozen at the top of the stairs. The video was queued up on her tablet, tightly clutched in her hands. Her heart was pounding, her breathing shallow. She could hear the faint music drifting up from below. The procession had begun. Bridesmaids were lining up. Cassandra would be coming down the aisle any minute now. Her feet didn't want to move. She remembered her therapist once told her that bravery wasn't loud. It was doing the hard thing, even when you were afraid, even when your knees were shaking, even when no one believed you yet. She took the first step. Downstairs, the guests began to rise as Cassandra entered the hall, gliding down the aisle in a designer gown that shimmered like moonlight. Her blonde hair was curled to perfection, her smile dazzling, her eyes focused squarely on Jason at the altar. She was the picture of a fairy tale bride, and beneath it all, a woman who had planned a murder. Jason watched her with a complex expression. She looked beautiful, yes, but something in his gut wouldn't let him settle. He had almost reached out to Lily again, just before the ceremony, but she'd already disappeared upstairs. Maybe she just needed space. The music swelled. Cassandra took her final step toward the altar. The officiant cleared his throat. Dearly beloved, we are gathered. Stop! The voice rang through the hall, slicing the air in half like a siren. Every head turned. A camera flash went off somewhere. Gas rippled down the aisle. Jason whipped his head toward the sound and saw Lily standing at the back of the hall, clutching her tablet like a shield, her small frame dwarfed by the gravity of the moment. Cassandra's smile faltered. The guest whispered, "Is that his daughter? Jason's little girl?" Lily walked forward slowly, her voice shaking but firm. "I have something to show you," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "It's about her." Jason stepped down from the altar, meeting Lily halfway, his face stricken. "Lily, what is this?" She handed him the tablet. "Just watch it." He looked down, pressed play. Cassandra's voice filled the speakers, cold, unmistakable, talking about bank accounts, about brake lines, about Jason dying in an accident. The room froze. Even the string quartet stopped playing. Jason stared at the screen, unable to blink. Cassandra, pale now, stepped back. "This is ridiculous," she said, laughing nervously. "She's a child. She's confused. That's probably fake." "Enough," Jason said, his voice like ice. He turned to the nearest security guard. "Take her out. Call the police." The crowd exploded into whispers and shocked gasps as Cassandra screamed, "This is a setup! Jason, you know me!" But Jason didn't flinch. He knelt down and looked Lily in the eyes. "How did you find this?" "I heard her," Lily whispered. "I didn't know what to do. I was scared." "You were brave," he said, and pulled her into a hug so tight she finally let go of her tears. And above them, the roses and silk still hung like ghosts of a wedding that would never be. The police arrived within minutes. Cassandra was still shouting when they placed her in handcuffs, her voice cracking beneath the weight of exposed lies. Her perfect hair had begun to fray, her mascara smudged. The calm grace she once wore now replaced with fury and panic. Guests parted to let the officers through, eyes wide in disbelief. Some recorded the moment on their phones, others simply stared, mouths agape. This was no longer a wedding. It had become something else entirely. Jason stood in stunned silence, his hand resting protectively on Lily's shoulder. His heart raced, not from embarrassment or even betrayal, but from the realization of how close he had come to disaster. Cassandra's words from the video echoed in his head like a nightmare refusing to fade. "As soon as we're married, I'll have access to his accounts." He had trusted her, shared meals, vacations, stories, introduced her to his daughter. To think that she had smiled at Lily, his Lily, while planning something so evil, it made his stomach turn. One of the detectives approached Jason after escorting Cassandra to a waiting cruiser. "We'll need a copy of that video," the officer said. "And your statement." Jason nodded. "You'll have everything you need." The detective glanced down at Lily, then knelt to her level. "You did a brave thing, sweetheart. You should be very proud." Lily didn't smile. She simply nodded, her grip on Jason's hand tightening. She hadn't wanted to be brave. She just wanted to protect him. After the police left and most of the guests had awkwardly dispersed, many of them mumbling awkward apologies or condolences, Jason led Lily upstairs. He didn't speak at first. His mind was swirling with questions, regret, and guilt. How had he not seen it? Why hadn't he listened to Lily's discomfort earlier? Why had he tried so hard to force something that clearly didn't fit? In his office, he gently helped Lily into the chair beside his desk and sat across from her. "I should have listened to you," he said finally, his voice quiet and raw. "You saw what I didn't." Lily looked down at her lap. "I didn't know if you'd believe me," he exhaled sharply. "I didn't give you a reason to think I would. That's on me." There was a long pause between them. Outside, the sunset began to warm the sky in streaks of orange and rose. The sound of the waves from the nearby coast filled the silence with a soft hush, like the world trying to soothe them both. "I thought she loved you," Lily said at last. "She always smiled at you. But it wasn't real. I saw it." Jason leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Sometimes we want something to be real so badly, we pretend we don't see the cracks. I wanted a family again, for both of us." "You already have one," Lily whispered. "Me." Jason's throat tightened. He reached across the space and took her hand in both of his. "That's the only one I need." Later that night, after Lily had fallen asleep curled up in her bed, still wearing her yellow dress and holding her stuffed fox tight against her chest, Jason stood in the hallway outside her door, watching her in the dim light. His heart swelled with a complex, overwhelming love, not just for the daughter he had chosen, but for the person she was becoming. She had saved his life, not just literally, but completely. And he knew now that this day, one that should have ended in vows and champagne, had instead given him something far more valuable than a marriage. It had given him the truth. And it had reminded him that real love isn't dressed in white or framed in ceremonies. Sometimes it stands at the back of a room with a trembling voice and a tablet in hand, whispering stop to a world that isn't ready to listen. But today he had, and everything had changed. The days that followed were filled with interviews, police reports, legal meetings, and press chaos. News of the halted wedding of Jason Matthews, one of the most prominent tech CEOs in the country, spread like wildfire. Headlines ranged from sympathetic to sensational. Runaway bride or cold-blooded con? 8-year-old girl exposes shocking plot. Paparazzi circled the gates of Jason's estate, and camera crews waited outside police stations, hoping for a glimpse of Cassandra in custody. Jason, however, shut it all out. The press could speculate. The public could gossip. But his focus remained on Lily. He canceled all meetings. He shut down his schedule. His company, whose stock had barely wavered thanks to his solid leadership, was left in the hands of trusted executives. Jason took time away from everything, and for the first time in years, he allowed himself to be still. Inside the quiet of their home, something fragile and important began to grow. Lily, though brave in front of the crowd that day, was quieter than usual now. She didn't speak much, but she stayed close. Every time Jason moved from room to room, she followed. Not clinging, not demanding, just there. Her presence was a constant reminder of what could have happened and what had been avoided. Jason tried to talk to her about it once. She was sitting on the couch beside him, curled under a blanket, absent-mindedly braiding her doll's hair. He gently reached over and placed a hand on her small back. "I know it's been a lot," he said quietly. "If you ever want to talk about what happened or how you feel or anything at all." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she put the doll down and looked at him, eyes wide and serious. "Do people still get married if they almost die?" she asked. Jason blinked, caught off guard. "I think they wait until they're really sure." Lily nodded thoughtfully. "Are you still sad about her?" He knew she didn't mean Cassandra. She meant Emily. "Sometimes," he said honestly, "I think I always will be. But it's different now. Not so sharp. More like a memory that doesn't hurt quite as much." Lily was quiet for a moment longer, then reached into the blanket and pulled out her tablet. "I deleted the video," she said. "I don't want to watch it again." "You don't have to," Jason replied. "That part is over." That night, he made a decision. He booked a trip, not for business, not for PR recovery, but for the two of them. Somewhere far from the mansion, from reporters, from questions and cameras. Somewhere simple, somewhere peaceful. They flew to the Oregon coast, to a little cottage he'd rented for the summer. It had no television, no luxury chef, no assistants. Just the sea, the sky, and long winding trails that smelled like pine needles and salt. They walked for hours each day, talked, ate ice cream cones on a porch that creaked in the wind. Jason taught Lily how to skip stones, and she taught him how to make peanut butter sandwiches the right way. They built puzzles, got sunburned, and laughed so hard at one of Jason's failed campfire stories that Lily fell over backward into the sand. One morning, as they sat watching the waves, Lily turned to him with a soft voice. "Do you think she's mad?" she asked. "That I stopped it?" He looked down at her, confused. "Who?" "Her. Cassandra." Jason paused. "Maybe, but that doesn't matter. You did the right thing, Lily. You did the bravest thing anyone could do." She looked out at the water. "I didn't want you to die." "I know," he said, "and you saved me." A few moments passed before she added, "I think Mom would have wanted me to." Jason's heart clenched. He hadn't heard Lily refer to Emily that way before. Mom. She had always been cautious with the title, unsure where she belonged in the narrative of a life she'd only joined at 5 years old. "I think she would have been proud of you," Jason said softly. "So proud." And in that quiet, beside the rhythm of the sea, something settled between them. Not closure, not quite, but healing. A beginning that neither of them had planned, but both of them needed. And for the first time in a long time, Jason Matthews felt truly whole. The Oregon coast had a strange way of pulling time apart, like taffy stretching between two hands. Mornings arrived slowly, with golden fog clinging to the tops of the evergreens and ocean mist curling along the rocky shore. For Jason and Lily, it was a kind of quiet neither of them had known before. Not the silence of grief or the heavy hush of secrets, but the peace that follows a storm that nearly destroyed everything. They stayed for nearly 3 weeks. Each morning began the same. Lily woke first, always before sunrise, and crept quietly into Jason's room just to check that he was still there. Sometimes she would climb into bed beside him and fall asleep again. Sometimes she would simply sit at the foot of the bed and wait for him to stir. Her nightmares had faded, but the habit of checking on him remained. Jason never once stopped her. In fact, it comforted him more than he ever admitted. He cooked her breakfast every day, scrambled eggs shaped like hearts, pancakes with chocolate chips arranged into smiley faces, even oatmeal with cinnamon swirled in like tiny galaxies. Lily was usually amused, often unimpressed. "Nice try," she said more than once through giggles, picking marshmallows out of cereal and offering him the soggy ones. Their days became a ritual. Long walks through misty trails, collecting shells on the beach, reading books curled up under thick woven blankets. Jason brought a small notebook everywhere and started writing again. Not code or reports, but thoughts, memories. A letter to Lily, though he hadn't yet told her. And slowly, day by day, the emotional wreckage left behind by Cassandra's betrayal began to clear. One afternoon, while hiking a quiet forest trail, they reached a clearing overlooking the sea. Lily was ahead of him, hair glowing in the late daylight, spinning slowly in the breeze with her arms stretched out like wings. Jason pulled out his phone and took a photo. Not posed, not perfect, but real. She caught him. "No more pictures," she groaned, running over. "You look like a superhero," he said. "I feel like one." He knelt beside her, brushing sand from her shoes. "You are one, you know?" She tilted her head. "Because I saved your life? Because you trusted yourself. That's harder than people think." Lily sat beside him on a fallen log and looked out at the water. "Will you ever get married again?" The question surprised him. He turned the thought over carefully. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Right now, I'm just glad to have you. That's enough." She nodded. "Okay." But Jason could tell something else was brewing behind her quiet response. So he waited, gave her space, and eventually it came. "Sometimes I think you'll want a real family, like with a wife, and I'll just be extra." Jason looked at her, then really looked. Her small hands were buried in the sleeves of her hoodie. Her eyes were fixed on the horizon. "You're not extra," he said gently. "You are the heart of this family." "But I'm not from you. Not really." "No," he said. "You're not from me. You're for me. That's even better." Lily blinked quickly, turning her head. He reached for her hand. "Family isn't just who you come from. It's who stays, who chooses you every single day. And I will always choose you." She leaned into his shoulder, quiet again. But this time, it was a warm quiet. The next morning, something shifted. Lily started humming at breakfast. Jason noticed her laughing more easily. They found a stray cat near the cottage and spent the day building it a cardboard house. Jason called it CEO Whiskers, and Lily rolled her eyes but fed it bits of her sandwich anyway. Toward the end of the week, a call came from Jason's assistant. The company wanted to know when he might return. Investors were beginning to ask questions. His team had been holding down the fort, but they missed their leader. Jason paced the small porch of the cottage with the phone in his hand, the sound of the waves behind him. He had thought he wouldn't want to go back, that the weight of his office, the long glass conference tables, the endless hum of meetings and market forecasts would feel suffocating now. But strangely, he missed it. He realized he didn't need to disappear to have peace. He just needed to return as someone changed. He ended the call with a promise to return in 2 weeks. Then he looked through the screen door, where Lily was sitting on the floor feeding the cat, her face lit by the glow of a late afternoon sunbeam. He didn't need more. The woman he nearly married had tried to steal everything from him. Trust, safety, love. But what she hadn't counted on was Lily, a little girl who had lived through more than most adults and still believed in protecting the ones she loved. That night, Jason sat on the edge of Lily's bed and handed her the notebook. "What's this?" she asked. "My promise," he said, "to you." She opened it. Inside were entries he had written every day since they'd arrived. Not about meetings or revenue or Cassandra, but about her, her favorite breakfasts, her bravery, the way she spoke the truth even when she was scared, the way she looked like sunlight when she laughed. Lily didn't say a word. She hugged the book to her chest and blinked hard. Jason kissed her forehead. "You're my beginning," he whispered. And for the first time in months, they both slept without fear. When Jason and Lily returned home from Oregon, the house didn't feel quite as big anymore. It wasn't that anything had changed physically. The mansion was still sprawling, the marble floors still glossy, the ceiling still too high, but something inside both of them had shifted. They no longer felt like occupants of a hollow space. They were no longer just surviving in the aftermath of a tragedy or betrayal. They were building something. Together. The first thing Lily did was rearrange her room. She asked Jason if she could take down some of the pastel decorations the interior designer had chosen and replace them with things she liked. Books, drawings, and tiny plastic figurines of forest animals. He gave her full permission. The room became hers in a way it never had been. Jason, meanwhile, returned to work. But he was different now. Calmer, more present, more willing to say no. His assistant, Amelia, noticed it first. "You're smiling at your emails," she said with a raised eyebrow one morning. "I'm just less afraid," Jason admitted. "Afraid of what?" "Missing what actually matters." The media frenzy had mostly died down. Cassandra had been denied bail and was awaiting trial, though her lawyers were already working overtime to manipulate the narrative. Jason refused to let himself be dragged into the drama. He told his team to stop issuing statements, to let the facts speak when they were ready. His only focus now was making sure Lily felt safe. And then came the letter. It arrived one afternoon in a plain white envelope with no return address. Jason recognized the handwriting instantly. Cassandra. He opened it with shaking hands and read in silence. Lily, who had been playing in the next room, peeked around the corner, sensing the shift in energy. "What is it?" she asked, stepping closer. Jason folded the letter and set it on the table. "Just words," he said, "from someone who doesn't matter anymore." Lily nodded slowly. She didn't need to know the details. She just needed to see that he was okay. Later that night after dinner, Jason asked her to sit with him in the study. He had something to tell her. "I've been thinking a lot about us," he began, his hands folded carefully in front of him. "About everything you did for me. About how strong and smart you are." Lily stared at him, cautious. "I know I adopted you legally years ago," he said, "but I never asked if you wanted to make that permanent in every way." She tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "I mean, would you want to change your last name to mine, officially?" Lily blinked. For a long moment, she said nothing. And then, in the smallest voice, "Really?" "Only if you want to," he said quickly. "You don't have to. I love you no matter what name you have." Lily stood up and walked to the window. She looked out at the backyard where they used to plant flowers with Emily, back when the world felt safer. She pressed her hand against the glass. "I think I'd like that," she whispered. "I think it would make me feel more like I belong." Jason rose from the couch and crossed the room. He wrapped his arms around her from behind. "You belong with me, no matter what. But if that's what you want, then we'll make it happen." That weekend, they filled out the paperwork together. Lily practiced signing her new name over and over again in different colors of ink. Lily Matthews, Lily Jane Matthews, L.J. Matthews. Jason bought a small locket and had her initials engraved on the back. Inside, he placed two tiny photos, one of her as a baby, from the few he'd been able to get when he first adopted her, and one of her standing at the edge of the sea in Oregon, her arms spread wide. "I love it," she said when he gave it to her. "You deserve to be reminded every day," he told her, "of who you are and what you survived." They began talking more. About her mom, about grief, about fear. Jason answered her questions, even the hard ones, without flinching. They cried sometimes. But they laughed more. He started telling her stories about Emily. Stories he'd been afraid to speak aloud, fearing they would break him. But now they felt like bridges, not chains. And Lily, she began to bloom. She joined a new art class. She asked for swimming lessons. She even invited a friend over for the first time in a year. The house echoed with giggles and the sound of footsteps that didn't tiptoe anymore. One evening, Jason watched her through the study window as she helped the gardener plant a new bed of sunflowers. Her idea. He took a deep breath. For the first time since the day he lost Emily, for the first time since the moment Cassandra said yes to his proposal, he wasn't holding his breath. He was breathing, really breathing. Because he knew, now more than ever, that families aren't built in grand ceremonies or photographs. They're forged in quiet bravery, in honest conversations, and in the unwavering trust between a father and the girl who saved him from forgetting who he really was. Spring melted into summer, and the world around them came alive again. Jason found himself waking up earlier than usual, not because of deadlines or emails, but because he liked making pancakes for Lily before her art class. The ritual had become sacred. Flour on the counter, music low in the background, Lily perched on the kitchen island drawing while he stirred batter and burned at least one pancake every time. She laughed about it now. "You're lucky I love you," she'd tease, flipping her braids over her shoulder like a judge on a cooking show. The house felt lived in, truly lived in, for the first time in years. Shoes at the door, paintings taped to the refrigerator. A forgotten stuffed fox on the stairs. The kind of beautiful mess only love could make. But one morning, Jason received a phone call that stirred an ache he hadn't expected. It was from a local news outlet asking for comment. Cassandra had accepted a plea deal, 10 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 6. Her lawyers released a statement framing her as emotionally unstable but remorseful. She had allegedly written a public letter of apology, one that, to Jason, sounded more curated than sincere. He sat at his desk for a long time, the phone in his hand, reading and rereading the headlines. He didn't feel anger, not even grief, just a strange hollowness, the kind of numbness that follows a wound that finally scabs over. He didn't mention it to Lily right away. Instead, he took her out that afternoon. No plans, no schedule. Just the two of them, driving with the windows down and the wind in their hair. They ended up at an old diner by the edge of town with plastic booths and the best milkshakes for miles. They played tic-tac-toe in crayon on the paper placemats. Lily won 4 times. Jason suspected she let him win once, just to be kind. It wasn't until they were walking back to the car that she asked, "Is it over now?" she said, kicking a pebble down the sidewalk. Jason paused. "Yeah, it's over." She didn't ask for details. She just slipped her small hand into his. "Good," she said. "I want to be done being scared." He nodded, squeezing her fingers gently. "Me too." The rest of the summer passed in golden blinks. Pool days, art shows, family barbecues with friends from Jason's company, who had over time become extended family to Lily as well. She asked him once, while watching fireworks explode across the sky on the 4th of July, if they could build a treehouse next year. He said yes without hesitation. "And a swing," she added. "And a telescope." He promised it all. Then came the day the name change was finalized. They dressed up for the courthouse like it was a holiday. Jason wore his navy suit and tie. Lily chose a yellow sundress with a tiny sunflower pattern and a matching ribbon in her hair. Her hands were shaking, but she smiled through them. In the courtroom, when the judge asked if she wanted her new name to be permanent, Lily answered clearly, "Yes." After the paperwork was stamped and the clerk congratulated them, Jason knelt beside her and whispered, "Ms. Matthews, I think you just became the most important person I've ever met." She grinned. "You already were, Dad." They celebrated with cupcakes and confetti in the kitchen that evening, and Jason let her stay up late watching cartoons in pajamas. He couldn't stop looking at her, not because of what she'd been through, but because of what she was becoming. Resilient, brilliant, herself. One night, as the summer faded and school approached, Jason found himself in the study alone. The house was quiet. He opened his notebook again and flipped through the pages he'd written during their time in Oregon. And then he turned to a fresh page. He began to write, "This isn't a story about a CEO, or a failed wedding, or betrayal. This is a story about a girl who told the truth when no one asked her to. It's about the father who listened. It's about second chances that didn't come in boardrooms or billion-dollar deals, but in late-night kitchen talks and morning pancakes and quiet hugs on hard days. It's about healing, the kind that doesn't make headlines. It's about Lily and me, and the life we almost missed, but didn't." Jason closed the notebook and smiled. He walked down the hallway, peeked into Lily's room, and found her sleeping, one arm wrapped around her fox, the other resting peacefully against the pillow. He stood there for a while, the soft hum of the house wrapping around him like a blanket. Tomorrow would bring school drop-offs and meetings and maybe a burnt pancake or two, but tonight everything was exactly where it should be. And it was enough. In my view, the ending of this story is both emotionally satisfying and deeply meaningful. It shows that true family isn't built on blood or perfection, but on love, trust, and quiet bravery. Lily's courage to speak up, even when no one was listening, ultimately saved a life. And Jason's choice to believe her gave them both a second chance at healing. The final chapters don't lean on drama for closure. Instead, they honor the slow, beautiful work of rebuilding trust after trauma. Jason doesn't rescue Lily. She rescues him just as much, reminding readers that children can be wise beyond their years, and that love, when honest and earned, changes everything. The story ends not with fireworks, but with peace. And sometimes that's the most powerful kind of ending.